Everyone called him Walter, or Professor Peach, since he was a geology professor at the university in their hometown of Duluth, Minnesota. Herb and his two older siblings just called him Dad. Dad held out a golden brown peach pie and said, "It's good to see you. We brought a pie." He held it aloft, and Herb took a quick step back. Even looking at pie still made him feel a little bit queasy. After spending part of the summer traveling around the country with his family, selling pie out of an old, beaten-down food truck, Herb was pied out. He never wanted to eat pie again in his entire life. "Oh, you shouldn't have," Aunt Lucinda said. But even as she said it, Herb watched her tear off a small piece of the pie's crust and pop it in her mouth. She winked at Herb. Before their big summer road trip, the Peaches had visited Aunt Lucinda fairly regularly, once a week usually, and always brought her some sort of little hostess gift. A book, a fake plant, or comfortable socks with funny sayings on them. In exchange, Aunt Lucinda cooked the Peach family delicious homemade meals and had endless supplies of chocolate on hand. Come in," she said, ushering them inside. Before Herb had even taken off his shoes, there was an explosion of yaps and barks as four small, energetic dogs skidded into the front entryway. Their tiny toenails made pat-pat-pat sounds as the dogs raced across the hardwood floors. They greeted the Peaches with a lot of barking and jumping, and one of the pups even managed to dip his furry snout in the peach pie Aunt Lucinda had carelessly set on a bench just inside the door. "Dasher, get away from my snack," Aunt Lucinda scolded, shooing him away. "Donnie, Vix, Rudy, behave." Herb plopped down onto the floor and let the dogs run all over him. He hadn't seen Aunt Lucinda's pups in nearly 2 months, not since before his family had left for their month-long great food truck adventure. When they'd finally gotten back to Minnesota at the end of July, Aunt Lucinda was away and the pups were at camp, which is what their great-aunt called the kennel. But now that summer was almost over, everyone was back home in Duluth, and Herb had a lot of missed cuddling and playtime to make up for. Truth be told, Aunt Lucinda and her dogs were the only things that kept Herb coming back to this big, scary mansion. Aunt Lucinda had always felt more like a grandma to him than a great aunt. Herb's actual grandparents had all passed away long ago, and after their mom died of cancer 2 years earlier, Dad's Aunt Lucinda had become an even more important part of the Peaches' lives. She was the only other family they really had, and the pups were an added bonus. Herb squirmed around on the wooden floor, trying to give equal belly rubs and ear scratches to everyone. The 4 little pups loved Herb, and Herb had lots of love to give back. The pups climbed over one another, eagerly sniffing Herb's face, nibbling and tugging at his shirt, and poking their noses into his pockets. Aunt Lucinda's pack of pups was very naughty, but also very sweet. By the time he had finished giving each of the dogs a proper greeting, Herb noticed that the rest of his family had made their way into Aunt Lucinda's enormous living room. Herb scooped Dasher up into his arms and followed his family. The other 3 dogs chased after him, leaping onto the sofas and chairs to greet the rest of the family. Freddie had flopped onto a couch, Lucy was browsing the built-in bookshelves on the far end of the living room, and Aunt Lucinda sat in her recliner next to the unlit fireplace. Dad was perched awkwardly on the front edge of Herb's favorite big, squishy armchair. Herb squeezed in behind Dad, trying to hide from all the paintings that always seemed to be keeping watch over his every move. "So," Dad said, at the exact same time Aunt Lucinda said, "Well?" Aunt Lucinda chuckled and went on, "I'm guessing you have some questions about my letter."